I'm Christelle from Diabetes Strong, and I created a lot of videos over the years about A1C. And in this video, I'm going to consolidate all the best learnings into one ultimate guide to lowering your A1C. When you're done watching this video, you'll know what is a hemoglobin A1c or just A1C, what is a normal A1C, and did you know that your A1C can get too low? Let's talk about that. We want to talk about why do you care about the A1C, and then of course, how to lower your A1C. I'll include easy implementable steps for lowering your A1C, as well as specific things that I've done over the years to achieve an A1C of 5.7%. And then I'll discuss how quickly can you actually lower your A1C, as well as how to measure A1C without having to go to the doctors. Since this is the ultimate guide to lowering your A1C, there might be sections that you already know that you want to skip or things that you want to go back and revisit. Use the timestamps down in the video description to skip ahead or to go back and rewatch sections. A1C or hemoglobin A1c or HbA1c or glucohemoglobin test, all the name for the same thing. And that is a blood test that shows you your average blood sugars for the last 2 to 3 months. It's worth noting that it's not an even average in the sense that your blood sugars the last few weeks will weigh a little heavier than your blood sugars 2 to 3 months ago. One way to think about an A1C test is this. Your blood, let's say, remembers 3 months back. That's why you can get your A1C measured from just one blood sample. You don't need 3. You just need one blood sample. That's also why you don't have to be fasting. You can get your A1C measured at any time of day because those last 3 months of information is already stored in your blood. If your A1C is high, that means that your blood sugars on average are elevated. And elevated blood sugars increases the risk of diabetes-related complications. People who do not live with diabetes usually have an A1C of 5.7% or lower. And it's worth noting that whenever you hear the term normal A1C, it often refers to an A1C for people who do not live with diabetes. So when we talk optimal A1C levels for people living with diabetes, the American Diabetes Association's 2022 recommendation is that most adults should aim for an A1C of 7% or lower. That equals an average blood sugar of 154 milligrams per deciliter, or that's 8.6 millimole per liter. And you can see a full conversion table here. So while you look at that, I do want to add that I had a chance to interview Dr. Ann Peters, and she is a professor of medicine at the Keck School of Medicine of USC and director of the USC Clinical Diabetes Programs. And I interviewed her for an article on the Diabetes Strong website. And her perspective is that A1C targets should be adjusted for the individual. For example, someone who's pregnant might want to keep their A1C at 6% or below, and an older person's target should be higher. Generally, she finds that having an A1C target of 6 to 7% is ideal, and that going below 7% has fairly little impact on complications. That doesn't mean that you can't strive for an A1C below 6%, but your A1C can get too low. An A1C below 4% generally indicates that your blood sugars are running below 70 milligrams per deciliter on an average basis. The thing is, when our blood sugars get that low, so 70 or below, we start to lose cognitive function. So that would be an example of a not healthy A1C. Also, remember A1C is an average. So if your A1C is 5%, that means that on average, your blood sugar is 97 milligrams per deciliter. It's not 97 all the time. Nobody's blood sugar is the same all the time. These 3 blood sugar drops all have an average of 97. But see this one? That is not a healthy A1C as it's driven down by too many low blood sugars. So a very low A1C shouldn't necessarily be an end goal in itself, especially if that low A1C is achieved through a lot of low blood sugars. A lot of people now focus on time and range, especially if you wear a continuous glucose monitor. The goal then is to stay as much of the time between 70 milligrams per deciliter and 180 milligrams per deciliter. But we do focus a lot on A1C because it is an indicator of your average blood sugars over time. And multiple studies have showed that elevated average blood sugars can lead to diabetes-related complications. So lowering your A1C to the recommended levels and keeping it there can help you reduce the risk of diabetes-related complications. You might have heard about some of these potential complications. They all sound very scary. They include eye, kidney, and nerve disease, as well as cardiovascular disease. We should definitely aim for blood sugars at a healthy level. It's also worth noting that the closer you get to the recommended A1C target range, the less benefit you'll get from lowering your A1C even further. So for example, lowering your A1C from 12 down to 11% makes a big difference, whereas lowering it from 7 down to 6% provides smaller benefit. A1c is measured by testing a blood sample, and most people have that done at their doctor's office. If your doctor has an A1c machine in their office, the test can be done with as little as a single blood draw. Some offices don't, and you'll have to get a regular blood draw and have that sent to a lab. My doctor visits are often virtual, so if needed, I'll go to a testing facility such as Quest Diagnostics to get my blood drawn and my A1c measured. If you live with diabetes, your doctor will guide you on how often they think your A1c should be measured, but rule of thumb is every 3 to 6 months. As I mentioned, there's also another way, and that is to measure A1c at home. A1c test could be a really important tool, but it can also be really expensive. Maybe your doctor's office is far away and you have to travel to get there, or maybe your insurance company won't pay for these tests. Well, what do? Well, it's your health and you have to decide what's best for you. But the good news is there's actually a way of measuring your A1c at home, and it's surprisingly affordable. I'll show you how to do that at the end of this video. Okay, by now you should have a pretty solid base understanding of A1c, what it is, what it means, and why it's important. Now let's focus on how to lower it and how to keep it where you want it. As I mentioned up front, I've made quite a few videos about lowering A1c, so I've divided it up into 4 chapters. First, I'll show you my 5 one-minute habits to lowering your A1c. And we'll also talk about how fast can you actually lower your A1c. Then I'll show you exactly what I did last year to lower my A1c down to 5.7% in just 30 days. Then I'll go over 3 tips for those who use insulin, and I'll wrap up this section with some really good long-term strategies for improving your insulin sensitivity that anyone can use to lower their blood sugars and thereby their A1c. So as promised, let's start with 5 one-minute habits. I want to focus on 5 really quick, super efficient habits. As I promised you, it's going to be 1-minute habits, and none of them will include altering your diabetes medication if you're using any. This is all about efficiency. First up, my most powerful 1-minute habit is to write down and assess everything that I'm about to eat or drink. You can write it down on a piece of paper or use an app. I use the free version of MyFitnessPal. So I think this is a way to take the phrase, pay attention to what you eat, to a tangible real life level. I'll usually look at what I'm eating, I might weigh it out using a kitchen scale, and then I assess or look up how many carbs are in that meal. This is critical information that you have to know if you're gonna figure out if the meals that you're eating are standing in your way of lowering your A1c. By writing things down and measuring your blood sugars after your meals, you can start to get an idea of whether or not your meals are working for you. Remember, you wanna measure your blood sugars before your meal as well as 1.5 hours to 2 hours after your meal. If your blood sugars aren't back to where you want them after that 1.5 hours to 2 hours, well, changing up the type of meals that you're eating, or maybe even eliminating those meals that are not working for you completely, could be your ticket to a lower A1c. I, for example, noticed that eating almonds rarely works for me. It should work. It's low carb, it's high in fiber, and it's super healthy. But unfortunately, eating just a serving of almonds will impact my blood sugars. That does not mean that I'll never eat an almond again, but it does mean that I've been looking for alternatives. I've become a big fan of macadamia nuts. I enjoy the flavor, they have less carbs, and I won't see a blood sugar impact like the one I see from almonds. And they just have a lot of good health benefits. My go-to are these flavored macadamia nuts, as well as the snack bars from House of Macadamia. Yep, that's me you see here. I actually like these bars and these nuts so much that I've started a collaboration with House of Macadamia, and they have different offers. So right now, while I'm recording this video, you can get a free snack bar as well as macadamia nut milk if you buy a bundle. There are different offers going on throughout the year, so depending on when you watch this video, it might be something else, but go check it out. You can just click on unlock your offer. You can see the package here that I like, my bundle, but you can also use this code STRONG for 10% off the whole website. It doesn't have to be my bundle. As mentioned, I log my meals in the free version of the MyFitnessPal app. I like free. It helps me keep track of my meals. It counts my carbs, including the hidden carbs. What do I mean by hidden carbs? Well, I think a good example is dairy. So for example, let's take a meal like cereal with milk. You might be counting the carbs in the cereal, but what about the carbs in the milk? Are you forgetting about those? That can easily be an extra 10 grams of carbs. Milk has lactose. Lactose is a sugar, which can hit blood sugars pretty hard. Same thing goes, for example, for coffee with milk. Okay, let's wrap up this habit. Writing things down, for example, on a piece of paper, or like I do, keep it in MyFitnessPal, means that I can keep track of my meals. I can hold that up against my blood sugars, and I can make data-driven, meaningful changes if needed. That could be changes to meal size, which carbs I'm eating or how many, or if I choose to eat them at all. Next 1-minute habit is to drink more of the right stuff. Generally, you want to make sure that you're drinking the right stuff and that you're not drinking things that are keeping your blood sugars elevated. So a good first step is to swap out sugary drinks for water or unsweetened tea. Cutting out liquid sugar can have a significant impact on your A1C levels. And I'm not just talking about soda. Remember that coffee with milk I mentioned before? That can be a significantly carby drink as well. Other sugary drinks are juices or smoothies, even the green ones. So if you're sipping orange juice all day, sure, you'll get your C vitamin, but you'll most likely also see elevated blood sugars. So drinking water or sugar-free drinks can help lower your A1C. Yes, you can drink too much water, but it is important to stay hydrated. Hydration plays a critical role in regulating blood sugars. Water helps the kidneys flush out excess glucose from the bloodstream, keeping the blood sugars in check. Although how much you should drink is very individual. General recommendations is 4 to 6 cups of water a day. It only takes a minute to pour yourself a glass of water and sip away. Okay, so we talked about how watching what we eat and drink can help us lower our A1C, but let's just pause for a minute and talk about why and how fast we can see an impact before we move on to that third 1-minute habit. So let's say that you make a small change based on a 1-minute habit. Let's say, for example, that you identify one meal that has made your blood sugars run high. You now make changes to that meal, and let's say that your blood sugar now, just on average, is 10 milligrams per deciliter lower than it was before. That could mean the difference between a 7.2% A1C and a 6.9% A1C. Okay, let's say that you've only seen this change for the last month. Well, your A1C could still have gone down. Let's do some quick math together here. So we were assuming that we only decrease our blood sugars 10 milligrams per deciliter on average for 1 month. So that's a total of 470 milligrams per deciliter. Since this is a 3 months average, we want to divide that by 3. So on average, that's a blood sugar of 157 milligrams per deciliter. We can then put that into our calculator here. 157, click calculate, you see this will take us to an A1C of 7.1. Okay, so hopefully you're convinced that this is still worth your time. Let's move on to those last 3 1-minute habits. My third habit, and this often comes as a surprise to people, but that's okay. It ties into that first habit of mine. When I look up my meals in MyFitnessPal, I don't only pay attention to the carbs, I also pay attention to the fats. For me, I try to keep my meals moderate to low fat because what I found is that high fat diets make me really insulin resistant. And insulin resistance is one of the main enemies of a well-managed A1C. Insulin resistant means that your body isn't as effective as it could be at utilizing the insulin that your body either produces or that you inject, and that can lead to elevated blood sugars. Wait, you might say, what about the keto diet, the one that's really high in fat? Isn't that brilliant for blood sugar management? Well, it depends. I tried the keto diet, and this was the first time that I really realized how bad a high-fat diet is for me. It made me really insulin resistant to the point where my diabetes management became very challenging, and even my endocrinologist asked me, like, can you please stop this diet experiment? So I did. But it did take a while for my insulin sensitivity to reset. However, some people really thrive on a keto, so a high-fat diet. So in conclusion, spend that 1 minute and pay attention to how fats impact your blood sugars. And if you're like me and see a negative impact, it might be really beneficial for A1C to dial back your fats a little bit, even the healthy ones. This is one of my favorite 1-minute habits, and it's one that took me a surprisingly long time to get established. But that is setting myself up for getting enough quality sleep. But establishing a solid bedtime routine can have a huge impact on your A1C. Because lack of sleep can make you more insulin resistant. And we do not want that, because that means that your body isn't as efficient at clearing glucose from your bloodstream. I generally aim for 8 to 9 hours of good quality sleep, and to achieve this, I have this little checklist. I have a fairly firm bedtime, so I want to be in bed before midnight. I also have a set screen time, meaning that once my teeth are brushed, the alarm is set, then my phone is put away. If I have a hard time falling asleep, I'll often try to do some deep breathing exercises. And then sometimes I'll listen to music, and it makes me fall asleep every time. Another habit that's very closely linked to the establishing a good sleep schedule habit is to establish habits around managing stress. Stress can mess with your A1C, as stress can trigger the release of hormones that can raise blood sugars. There are different habits that you can establish to help combat stress, but I guess it depends on which kind of stress that you're facing. I have some different habits that I use. So I have a 1-minute stretching program. There are some deep breathing exercises that I do. And then if I have more than a minute, I like to work out. That really helps me managing my stress levels. I also try to focus on letting go of things that I can't really impact. It's a harder one, but I think it's a good way to simply sit down, think through your situation, say, what can I actually do something about and what do I need to let go? On to the last 1-minute habit of this video, and that is to take a brisk walk after your meals. Just 10 minutes of walking can help you lower your blood sugars and improve your insulin sensitivity. But wait, what's up with this? I know I promised you easy 1-minute habits, and now I'm asking you to go for a 10-minute walk. What's up with that? Well, the habit that I think you should consider and that I want you to think about is getting up and move. Get out of that chair, move around. Yes, ideally you'd go for a walk, but you could also clean the house. You could play with the kids or do a little dance. And the thing is, when it comes to activity, everything matters. Even if that's 5, 10, 15, 1-minute burst of activity throughout the day. It all counts and it can all help you be on that path to a lower A1C. By incorporating one or all of these 5 1-minute habits, you can be on your way to lowering your blood sugars and achieving a lower A1C. Those were a bit more general tips. Let me now also show you what I did last year to lower my A1C. Do you want to know how I lowered my A1C to 5.7% in just 30 days? I'm not a gatekeeper. I'll happily share because I just made some meaningful changes to my daily routine that you can make as well if you want to lower your A1C. And I'll be sharing exactly what I did, what changes I made. I'll share my blood sugars, I'll share my A1C, and I'll even share a maybe surprising thing I did not do to lower my A1C. I've had my A1C measured consistently since I was diagnosed, and it has varied quite a bit. In the beginning, my A1C would usually be around the 8.5 to 9%. Not because I wasn't paying attention or not making an effort. One could say I lacked a little bit of diabetes education or knowledge back then. But once I knew, I started to manage my A1C a little tighter. And within the last about 10 years, I've aimed for an A1C of 6 to 6.5%. That goal has worked for me, it's worked for my medical team, so it's something I've been happy with. However, over the summer, I started to notice that my blood sugars were running higher than usual. I also noticed that they were fluctuating way more aggressively than I'm comfortable with. I wear a Dexcom CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, and that allows me to see my blood sugars 24/7. It also allows me to go back and see my historic blood sugar numbers. And when I did that, I could see that my estimated A1C was at 6.3%, and that my standard deviation, so that's how much my blood sugars fluctuate, was all the way up at 42. As you can see here, it doesn't say A1C anywhere in this report. It says GMI, Glucose Management Indicator. And that is simply the indication of what the A1C is going to be. I should mention that my GMI is usually a little overestimated compared to my actual A1C. Yes, I know that at 6.3% is actually right in that target I have of 6 to 6.5% A1C, but if I'm completely honest, I prefer to see a number closer to 6. So I decided to make some changes and get it down to 6 or lower and to reduce my standard deviation. So that's, again, how much my blood sugars are fluctuating. And I did just that, and I did it in just 30 days. I took my GMI down to 6% and I took my standard deviation down to 35. I then went and got my blood drawn at a lab and had my A1C measured, and will you look at that? It came back at 5.7%. And the thing is, I did not achieve this by adding more insulin or other diabetes drugs. I simply changed, or I should say tweaked, 5 things about my daily routine. And what might surprise some people is that I did not change how many carbohydrates I ate. I did change one thing about my diet though. You might find it a little surprising, but I'll let you in on all the details later on in this video. So let me share those 5 tweaks that I made to lower my A1C and reduce my fluctuations. Let's go. The first thing I did was focus on my evening routines, because after looking at my blood sugar reports, I realized that I was often running higher than I like after 6 p.m. Also, I was correcting those high blood sugars to get down into range before bedtime, which meant, unfortunately, that I had a lot of low blood sugars overnight. You can see it's higher here, and we have some low blood sugars as well. Those are those red dots down here. My solution to this was threefold. So I reduced my serving size for dinner. For the most part, I would try to have dinner before 7 p.m. And then finally, I reduced or eliminated evening snacking. I haven't eaten less overall the last month. I just moved some of that food that I was eating at night to either breakfast or lunch. Moving my meals and how much I'm eating to earlier in the day has clearly had a huge impact on my evening blood sugars. But honestly, I think that my evening snacking has probably made the biggest impact. The thing is with snacking, it often tends to become a little bit mindless. And I was probably snacking at night more out of habit than because I was actually hungry. Another evening routine I cut back on has been alcohol. Over the summer, I've gotten into the habit of enjoying a glass of wine after dinner. And while a glass of wine can be fine, and for some people it might work really well, for me it just didn't. Cutting out that one glass of wine probably also made it easier for me to stop the evening snacking, as the snacking and the wine often went hand in hand. I haven't cut alcohol out completely, but it's no longer a daily thing. And I know the science behind why that has probably helped with my blood sugar management. Because studies have shown that just 30 days of cutting out alcohol can significantly improve insulin sensitivity. So there you go, an easy adjustment to help achieve a lower A1c. Then there's my exercise routine. I was injured most of the summer as I pulled my Achilles back in August. Of course, that doesn't mean that I couldn't exercise or do other stuff, but I must admit that I didn't, and my gym membership was really collecting dust. Anyone who knows me knows that I love to move, so that injury was heartbreaking. But you're gonna laugh, I actually injured myself during a exercise class, not just any exercise class. I injured myself during a step class. Yep, full-on 80-step class, running up and down a step. But okay, I'm going out on a tangent here. Let's get back to the things that I implemented this last month. I started out by going for a few long walks a week, and I'm still doing that. And then I went back to the gym. Remember what I said, I love to move, so for me, going to the gym is fun. If you don't like going to the gym, or if you're new, don't try to do as much as I do. It's probably going to be too much. But what I do is I go to the gym and I do resistance training 3 to 4 times a week. Most often it's 3 times. I do one cardio class. I do a Zumba class. It's great fun. I enjoy it. Makes me smile. Then I do a Pilates class. So that is strength and it's balance, it's core. And I still go for those long walks. So that's 5 times that I exercise a week and the long walks. For the last many years I've been in the gym, I've exercised 6 days a week. So this is actually a little less than what I've done for a long time, but it's certainly way more than I did over the summer. You do not have to do as much as I do to improve your insulin sensitivity. So your insulin sensitivity is how effective your body is at utilizing the insulin that you either produce or that you inject. You can do less and achieve a lot. So if you're new to exercise or if you have limited time, you could start out by just going for walks. When you have time or you feel like it, you could add resistance training. So resistance training is any type of exercise where you put your muscles under tension. That could be with weights, that could be body weight. It can be resistance bands. There's a lot of options and you don't have to go to a gym. Okay, we're almost ready to talk about that one thing I changed about my diet. But first, remember how I said up front in this video that I looked at my blood sugar reports. I've been looking at my blood sugar reports and I've been doing a bit of high-level analysis to simply assess whether or not I needed to adjust my insulin while I was working on reducing my A1c and my fluctuations. And I do want to highlight the reducing the fluctuations again, because having a low A1c but blood sugars that fluctuate all over the place is not ideal either. I would love to have my fluctuations, so my standard deviation, all the way down at 30. I'm at 35, so I still have something to work on. So on a weekly basis, I would go in, I would look over my blood sugars, I would look over my fluctuations, and I would make a decision on whether or not I needed to adjust my insulin doses. So you might need to do this in collaboration with your medical team. I'm completely self-managed, so I do adjust my doses myself. I should add that if I need help in making a decision, I can always reach out to my endo and she'll weigh in. And what you might not expect is that the only major change that I made to my insulin dosage during those 30 days where I lowered my A1C and my standard deviation, the only change I made was that I lowered, not increased, I lowered my long-acting insulin dose. Yeah, so not more insulin, less insulin. So let's go back to that report. So again, these are 30-day averages, but you can kind of get an idea. These red dots are low blood sugars. I had way too many lows overnight. I would then treat those lows with glucose, which would make my blood sugar shoot up to a healthy level, which is what we want. But again, that increases the standard deviation, the variability. What you can see here for the last 30 days is that I managed to reduce those lows quite a bit. I don't mind my blood sugar reaching 70 milligrams per deciliter, but I do not want it to go lower than that. And then the final thing that I did to reduce my A1C and my fluctuations was to change one thing about my diet. And no, it was not how many carbohydrates I was eating. It was how much fat I was consuming. We all react a little bit different to different diets, and I just know from experience that my body does not react super well to a diet high in fat. And it makes my insulin sensitivity really suffer, making it harder to keep my blood sugars in range. Needless to say, I didn't do super well on a keto diet back when I tried that out. Mainly it was my snacking that was high in fat. I was eating a lot of nuts, I was eating a lot of nut bars, as well as cheese. I do love cheese. But cutting out my snacking really significantly reduced the amount of fat that I was consuming. Fat is, of course, still a part of my diet. It's just not as big of a part as it was over the summer. And that was the 5 things that I did to reduce my A1C and my blood sugar fluctuations in just 30 days. I'm really happy with these results, and I hope they can serve as an inspiration if you're looking to reduce your A1C. And maybe all of these aren't for you, but hopefully they can give you some inspiration to figure out what works for you and your lifestyle. I want to dig a bit deeper and talk about 3 strategies for people who use insulin to lower their blood sugars. If that's not you, don't worry about it, just skip ahead to the next section. If your doctor recommends that you lower your A1C, or if you just decided that you want to, or if you're struggling to keep your A1C steady, there are a few different things you can do. I do have to add that you should not make any changes to your diabetes management without consulting your medical team first. Analyzing my numbers and addressing pain points frequently. What I found to be the most impactful thing to do when it comes to my diabetes management is to review my historic blood sugar numbers every few days and not just rely on my endos analysis whenever I see her every 3 to 4 months. I look at my historic blood sugar data every few days and assess whether or not I need to make any changes to my diabetes management. I must admit, usually I have a pretty good idea even before I look at the data whether or not anything major has come up, because I'll remember if I've had repeatedly high blood sugars in the afternoon or have been going high or low overnight. But I also know that memory can be totally unreliable, so I'd rather look at hard data. And what I look at is my Dexcom reports. That's a continuous glucose monitor I wear that sends my blood sugar readings automatically to my phone. And I also look at my InPen report. So InPen is a smart insulin pen that I use, and combine those 2 devices, they collect all my blood sugar data as well as all my insulin injection data. But you don't need all that gear to get good data. All you need is a glucometer, frequent blood sugar measurements, and a notebook. But of course, it's not enough to just look at the numbers. I also look for pain points, or said differently, I look for trends that can indicate that I should make changes to my diabetes management. And that leads me to the second thing that I do consistently to keep my A1C below 6.5%, and that is making changes to my diabetes management when needed, and that can be daily. I manage my blood sugars using insulin, so often making changes to my doses on a daily basis makes sense. I manage using a long-acting insulin that I take in the morning as well as the evening, as well as a rapid-acting insulin that I take for meal incorrections. So my long-acting insulin that I take in the morning is probably the one I change the dose of the least, I'd say. But I do change it once in a while. So especially if I find that I run, let's say, high in the afternoons consistently. If I find that I run high in the afternoons, and let's say it's outside the 4-hour window after I last took a rapid-acting insulin, then I have a fairly good idea that it's my long-acting insulin that's off, and I'll make changes the next day. And remember, I said consistently. So for example, one afternoon high, that's just an event. That's not a pattern. So if I consistently see that I have highs in the afternoon, for example, then I'll make the change. I adjust my nighttime long-acting insulin fairly frequently. So I'll adjust it depending on my activity level and my eating pattern. So I'll vary between anything from 1 unit to 8 units before I go to bed in the evening. So that's quite a lot. And then when it comes to my rapid-acting insulin, again, the one for meal and corrections, for that one, I have kind of an assumptions that I go by. And the assumption is that I have a carb ratio of 1 to 10. So that means that 1 unit of insulin covers 10 grams of carbs. I also assume that I have a correction factor or insulin sensitivity factor of 50, meaning that 1 unit of insulin will lower my blood sugars 50 milligrams per deciliter. So that's the base assumption. But let me give you an example. I recently noticed that my blood sugars would start to climb just before bed, which I would correct. So they would climb to maybe 160, 175, and I would correct with 1 unit of insulin, assuming a correction factor or insulin sensitivity factor of 50. However, what I found was that that was actually too much. I was dropping down in the low glucose territory. I was getting closer to 70 and below, which of course I don't want to be there, especially not at night. So what that made me realize that after that had happened a few times, again, I needed to see that consistently before making a change. Then I could go in, look at my data, actually realize that 1 unit of insulin at 10 p.m. in the evening was actually lowering my blood sugars closer to 100 milligrams per deciliter. That means that my correction factor at that time is probably 100 and not 50. That's a small tweak. It's only half a unit. But that small tweak meant that I can correct my blood sugars so don't go high while maintaining healthy blood sugars and not going low either. Again, small tweak, but it's based off of my data. Understanding how different things impact blood sugars, so I can be more proactive than reactive when it comes to blood sugar management. We all know that carbohydrates impacts blood sugars, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But do you also pay attention to some of the other things that can impact blood sugars? How about sleep quality, your stress level, your hydration? How about hormone fluctuations? How are you feeling? Are you sick? Are you drinking a lot of coffee? Yep, I said coffee. Some people actually see quite a significant impact on blood sugars when they drink coffee. My point here is to pay attention to blood sugar patterns, and thereby we can identify what impacts our blood sugars, and not just when it comes to food, but when it comes to life, so that we can manage our blood sugars accordingly. I, for example, often see a blood sugar rise in the morning. That has nothing to do with food. It's my body releasing glucose into the bloodstream. So it's a hormonal response. And because I've noticed that, because I've seen it consistently, that means I can proactively go in, give myself a little bit more insulin, and I can prevent high blood sugars in the morning. Another example, I know that if I don't exercise for a week, let's say I'm going on vacation, my insulin sensitivity will drop and my insulin needs will therefore go up. So what that means is I can proactively increase my insulin levels so I won't run high for a whole week. And then there's understanding how different types of food impacts blood sugars. And I'm not just talking about carbs here. Most people, myself included, will see blood sugar impact if you, for example, eat large amount of protein. Nothing wrong with that. It's just something to be aware of so that we can manage for it. But yes, carbohydrates or carbs. It is the macronutrients that we talk the most about because it is the one that will hit blood sugars most aggressively. But the thing is, we don't all react or see the same blood sugar reaction to certain carbs. So for example, let's take something like oatmeal. So some people see very sharp increases in blood sugars, maybe even prolonged increases when they eat oatmeal. I'm likely to be one of those who can eat it without any crazy blood sugar fluctuations. But if you do see those sharp increases or prolonged increases, you might want to consider maybe trying a different portion size, maybe change up your dosing strategy a little bit, or maybe it's just not worth it for you. And that means cutting it out for a while. That's okay. As long as you pay attention to how it impacts you and come up with a strategy. While I don't believe in letting your diabetes management dictate how you live your life, I do think that we have to assess how different things impact us so that we can come up with strategies for how to best live with those choices or change those choices so that we can live healthy with diabetes and maintain good blood sugar levels, and healthy A1Cs. Those were all very targeted strategies, but I think it's also beneficial to look a little broader. Let's briefly discuss how to fix insulin resistance as a way of lowering A1C. So when we talk about insulin sensitivity, what we're talking about is how effective your body is at utilizing insulin. So that can be the insulin that your body produces, or if you live with insulin-dependent diabetes like I do, it would be how effective your body is at utilizing the insulin that you inject. If your insulin sensitivity is not as it should be, you might have been told that you're insulin resistant. Insulin resistance is a center of prediabetes as well as type 2 diabetes. However, people living with type 1 diabetes can also develop significant insulin resistance. If you're insulin resistant, the cells in your muscle, fat, and liver don't respond well to insulin and won't be able to easily remove glucose from your bloodstream, which can lead to elevated blood sugar levels if your body can't produce enough insulin to keep up with the elevated demand. And this issue is one of the two primary culprits behind the development of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. The other one being insulin deficiency, meaning that some people don't produce enough insulin. Some of the reasons that can lead to insulin resistance are excessive body weight, lack of exercise, smoking, or sleep problems. And some medications can also increase the risk of developing insulin resistance. So let's talk about what you can do to improve your insulin sensitivity. I think one of the most effective ways is to incorporate more exercise into your daily routine. Especially resistance training is super effective when it comes to improving insulin sensitivity. And you don't have to be a bodybuilder to see improvements from resistance training, but you do have to challenge your muscles. So resistance training is anything where we put our muscles under tension. So that, for example, could be body weight exercises. Think squats or push-ups. You can be working with resistant bands. I have one here. It's a resistant band. Or you could be working with weights like dumbbells, barbells. But if that sounds too daunting for you, you can also just start by walking. Including a 30-minute walk after lunch, for example, or dinner can have a huge impact on your health, as well as on your insulin sensitivity. Now let's talk diet, because what you choose to eat can have a huge impact on your insulin sensitivity. So this doesn't mean that you just have to eat lettuce to optimize your insulin sensitivity, but making a few meaningful changes could potentially have a huge impact on your insulin sensitivity. If your diet predominantly consists of processed food, you could cut that down somewhat. You could replace some of those meals with less processed foods. So incorporating more fruits, vegetables, and grains. Not all processed foods are bad for you, obviously. Just because peas have been frozen doesn't make them a bad choice. However, you do have to be mindful of processed foods with added ingredients such as fat, salt, and sugar. You can see the guidelines from NHS here. And as you can see here, what they consider high fat is more than 17.5 grams of fat per 100 gram, or saturated fat would be high if it's more than 5 grams per 100 gram. For sugar, the guideline is more than 22.5 grams of sugar per 100 grams would be considered high, and for salt, it'd be more than 1.5 gram of salt per 100 milligram. And of course, you won't just necessarily know how much fat, sugar, and salt is in a product, but you just have to look at the nutrition label and it's all listed right there. So I think less processed food and more whole foods. The next thing you can do, and this really does not apply to everyone, however, if you are overweight, your insulin sensitivity can improve if you can reduce your overall body fat, as excessive body fat blunts the body's insulin sensitivity. Even losing and maintaining a 10-pound weight loss can make a difference. And to lose weight, and this is very high level and I'm simplifying, but to lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit. That means that you have to consume fewer calories than you burn. That calorie deficit can be achieved through adjusting your diet and or adjusting your activity level. And now let's talk about alcohol. So just as you can enjoy a slice of pizza occasionally, you can also occasionally enjoy a drink of alcohol. However, alcohol, and especially excessive drinking, can have a huge negative impact on your insulin sensitivity. Research have found that merely 30 days of alcohol abstinence can significantly improve insulin sensitivities. So if you don't really care about alcohol, if it's not your thing, if you can be without it, maybe try cutting it out for a while and see what it does for your body. Another thing to cut out of your life to improve your insulin sensitivity is smoking. So by now, we probably all know that smoking and other tobacco use isn't exactly healthy. But aside from the cancer risk, it can also significantly impact your insulin sensitivity. In fact, after smoking, vaping, or chewing tobacco, it can take up to 48 hours for the nicotine to clear the body and for your insulin sensitivity levels to return back to your baseline. And the final thing I want to bring up in this video is managing your stress levels. The stress hormones cortisol and adrenaline can be constantly elevated if you do not manage your stress levels and your sleep patterns. And elevated stress hormones will make you more insulin resistant. So we can't necessarily change the environment that we live in, but there are some steps that you can take to help improve your stress levels. So, for example, you can keep a sleep schedule or nap whenever possible. You can use guided meditation or breathing techniques when life becomes too hectic, or simply just be more mindful of breathing, relaxing, managing your stress. And those were the 6 things that you can implement today to improve your insulin sensitivity and reduce your insulin resistance. If you can't do all 6 of them, choose the one that you think will be most impactful for you and start there. At this point, I think we can all agree that the A1C test can be a great tool. We know what it means and we have strategies in place on how to manage our A1C. But what if we have to travel far to get to our doctor's office? Or what if our copay is really high, or the overall cost of getting this test is just, too much? Well, as I promised you, there is a solution, and that is to do an at-home A1C test, and it's actually fairly affordable. I've been living with type 1 diabetes since 1997, so I've had a lot of A1C tests done over the years. And the test I'm going to show you today is the fastest. It only takes 5 minutes, so it's the most efficient way of measuring my A1C. I'll address some of the questions that you might have when it comes to at-home A1C testing, such as where can you actually get an at-home A1C test kit? How much does it cost? How do you actually do the test? As well as how accurate are these tests? The at-home A1C test kit is an over-the-counter product, so you don't need a prescription to buy one. You can just go in and pick it up. I bought them from a few different places over the years, including my local pharmacy, which is a CVS, as well as from Amazon. Let me show you how to do the at-home test. I've done this test before, but I really recommend that you read the insert that comes in the packet, just the how-tos, all the steps, as well as, of course, watch this video, because I have messed this test up before because I did not do it right, and that's such a sad waste of money. But let me show you. If you already know how to use this test, don't worry about it, just skip ahead to the next section. We talk more about how to interpret your A1C result. But if you do not know how to do this, open up your box, and in here, this is whole insert. Read it. It's really helpful and explains all the steps. It's different languages as well, but we open up the box here, and what you see here is the actual meter. So save this because this box comes with 4 tests, and it's the same meter that you use for all of them. So you want to get out a test and one of these little pouches with, there's a finger poker and stuff. But let's unpack it. First, you want to open up this little pouch with the black line. So in here, see the finger poker. There's also the sample collection. I don't know what to call that. Container. That's the little one with the black one. But we're going to start out. First, you want to wash your hands with soap. I already did that. Make sure your hands are dry. Then you want to poke your finger. This one really pokes deeply, just so you're warned. And you see I'm really bleeding a lot. So you collect the blood drop in here, and you want to get in the right amount so it shouldn't overflow. I didn't get quite enough here, so I'll just push out a little bit more blood. So I'll collect all the blood in here. Here we go. And then you simply push it into the collection thingy here, all the way in, and then shake it. Now you put that aside, and then you open up the red pouch. The red pouch here has the actual test. So here you see this little mark down here. So that has to match and line up with the mark on here. So let's just push that in. Here we go. And now it turns on. So you can see here it says wait. Pull this apart, and then you simply click it in there, and then really push it down. Click, and then it says run. This simply means that the test is running, and now it takes 5 minutes. Let's fast forward. Here we go. And these are the last few seconds, and here we go. That means that the test is done. 6.1%. So that is my current A1C. The A1C Now kit from Amazon is the cheapest one I've found. If you prefer to go to CVS, product looks like this, and it's a little bit more expensive. However, most people have a CVS around the corner, so it might be faster to get it that way. So how to pick your test kit? Well, it comes down to how much do you want to pay and how fast do you want it. I have not tried to get my insurance to pay for the A1C test kit. My insurance generally doesn't want to pay for anything, and to get it reimbursed through the insurance, you usually need a prescription, and I don't want to have to pay for a visit to my doctor to try and get my insurance to pay for the products. I just pay cash. This kit has 2 tests in it, and it cost me $52.79. So that's $26.40 per test. And I bought this at my local pharmacy. The A1C Now test from Amazon, you see that here, is somewhat cheaper. So here you get 4 tests, and 4 tests cost me $65 or $67.50. So that's $16.19 per test. So it's a cheaper option. They also have a 20 pack, so where you get 20 tests, and that's around $200. Overall, this is the cheapest I've found. And I will leave a link for you down in the video description. Now the $1,000,000 question is, are these tests accurate? Can you actually trust the A1C number that you get with an at-home test? So for this video, I decided to do a little bit of an experiment, and I wanted to compare the A1C Now test kit to the CVS test kit, just to see, how similar they were. And this was the result. You can see, very similar. However, for it to be a good experiment, I did do more than 1 test of each. And what I found was that with the CVS at-home test kit, I actually saw fluctuations. So I got results from 6% up to 6.4%. Whereas with the A1C Now kit, it just consistently came back with a 6.1%. To this story also comes that this product, the A1C Now kit, is IFCC as well as NGSP certified. And I actually did a full test. So I did a whole video where I tested this product up against an at-home blood draw that you send into a lab, as well as actually going to the lab and get a full blood draw. Definitely pros and cons to each of those. I think my favorite is probably the at-home test. I mean, you can't beat that. That was 5 minutes, didn't require a lot of blood. Overall, that was very easy. Second would be going to the lab, especially if you need to get other blood work done. It just makes more sense. Also, I do really trust the labs. I know that there can be a little bit of differences between the labs, but you know that the quality is high there. Of course, then you have to get in your car, have to drive there to get the results. So that's a little bit more time consuming. You might also have to pay more out of pocket for going to the lab. I'm not super impressed with the sample where I had to send it in and then get my results back. Just because it took so long. That's not any fault of the lab, obviously. That is the mail system right now. But also it came back 0.5 higher than my 2 other A1C tests, which, makes me doubt it just a little bit. Overall, choose whatever is most convenient for you. Just know that there are pros and cons to each of them. Living with diabetes is a lifelong learning curve. Diabetes is not static. Our body changes, our lifestyle changes, our access to technology and medication changes. And as that changes, we have to adapt to continue to keep our A1C where we want it. But you're not alone in this. There are a lot of resources available, including this YouTube channel, of course. You can also look at my website, Diabetes Strong. Here you'll find a lot of free resources for people living with any type of diabetes. And you can also sign up for our newsletter right here. I hope you found this video helpful and that you'll save it as your go-to A1C resource. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.